All right, listen, local elections are everything. I keep telling you all that. There is a big primary in Texas, March 3rd. We've had Calvin Allred on, who, of course, is running in his district in Dallas. We've had Jasmine Crockett on, who's running for senator. There's a lot of stuff going on in Texas, but I do think it's important to focus on the state house in Texas, right? I think it's really, really important because they did all that redrawing and all that good stuff. And we have somebody on. She is the state rep candidate for Texas House District 50. She's also an immigration attorney in private practice. We love immigration attorneys here. She has a great vision. Want to bring her on to talk with her. Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, how are you?
Hey, good morning. I am hanging in there.
I can imagine. So this is, how are you feeling about, so much stuff, redrawing mid-decade, the back and forth. I don't believe those are those maps in place now for the primary March 3rd, or will that be later?
They do. Well, they apply for the congressional races. I'm running for the Texas House, and the Texas maps were not redrawn. So there's no redistricting in my race today.
Gotcha. Today. Exactly. So this is your first time on the show. Tell us a bit about your journey as far as an immigration attorney and how you got into politics.
Yeah, I am primarily an immigration lawyer. That's my mission and my passion in life. And I would have been, happy and fired up doing that forever. I've been doing it for 20 years in Texas. My first client was a little baby in detention, under the George Bush era, and I've been through a lot, helping reunite separated families taken at the border, and, being an immigration lawyer in Texas for 20 years, that's what that looks like. But in Texas, we also have a state legislature that is very cooperative with ICE enforcement and consistently is passing laws that allow racial profiling and terrorize Texans. And when the seat opened up in my district, in which I've lived for 20 years, I thought, if there were ever a time to try and get inside that building and make more of an impact, it is now. And so that's what I'm doing, trying to get in, the Texas Capitol to, frankly, as a Democrat, play some really strong defense until we can, eventually get a majority and actually pass some positive legislation.
Now, the State Department announced that it would pause immigration visa processing from 75 countries. Tell us what that means for Texas, and what does that mean for people who are undocumented, even for the average citizen in Texas, what that means to pause visa processing.
I don't think we can undercount the impact of this nationwide. This is not just a Texas thing, of course. We talk and focus a lot on enforcement actions, as we should, but this closure of visa processing for 75 countries represents 50 or 48% of legal immigrants coming into this country. And it actually represents 90% of all of the people coming in from Africa. And when you look at the countries that are impacted, it's extremely clear that this is a racially motivated action. And this country has been here before. It was in 1924 where the Congress really grappled with how can we pass a racist immigration law that will be held up in the courts. And they did. It took them 2 years, but they passed it. And then the president at the time, Calvin Coolidge, signed it, saying some really racist stuff. And then that law made America whiter over the next 40 years until the civil rights era. And this is exactly what Trump and Stephen Miller are doing without legislation right now. And it's quiet, it's subversive, but it's going to have the same racial impact. And it's really important that we are all paying attention and talking about it, and that Congress acts, but also that there's litigation and the courts block these visa bans.
And isn't it true that this kind of racial profiling, people shouldn't think, oh, it'll only affect Hispanic people, it'll only affect undocumented people. I know Black Americans who have been stopped. There have been Black Americans who they said, show me your papers. We can never think that bigotry, legalized bigotry, just is going to end with one group, right?
No, absolutely not. But I want to read you a quote from Calvin Coolidge, because this is the same mentality, the same behavior. He said at the time when he signed this law, There are racial considerations too grave to be brushed aside for any sentimental reasons. Biological laws tell us that certain divergent people will not mix or blend. The Nordics propagate themselves fully. With other races, the outcome shows deterioration on both sides. And that gives me just like chills down my entire body. It is so creepy to me because we all know, we've watched Stephen Miller, we know what his policies are, and this is what they are doing, and this is what they believe. And so, yeah, this should matter to everybody, whatever race you are, of course.
Calvin Coolidge, he had a really horrible. He was about replacing black delegates from the South with white ones. I mean, he had a really creepy history. I love a history reference, so thank you for that. It's crazy how some things that were said many decades ago still hit hard today. So that's really powerful. So how do you compare ICE, the way that ICE operates and is politically supported in Texas, versus place like a Minnesota or a Chicago?
Oh, it's completely different. And I just want to commend the leadership in Illinois and Minnesota and the bravery that they're demonstrating, and the people of those cities and those states and the way that they're showing up for their neighbors. That part is really heartwarming. And down in places like Texas, unfortunately, our governor, Greg Abbott, is all too happy to just roll over and do whatever Trump wants. And so last year, he forced all the state troopers in the state to become ICE agents. So more than 3,000 people have just been pulled over by the state troopers in the state. The legislature has spent $18 billion of Texan taxpayer money on immigration enforcement, which that could have raised teacher salaries over that same time frame by $8,000 a year. I mean, it boggles your mind when you start thinking about how that money could have been spent to actually benefit the lives of people living in the state. But instead, Abbott is just willing to go along with it and terrorize people and spend all of our money here in Texas. And that, of course, is the reason that I'm running. And it's the reason that we're seeing so many people rise up right now. And that I'm happy to see, because sometimes there's a desensitization that can happen when you see all these horrors on your news feed, and you just are like, I can't even open up social media right now. It hurts too much. But we've, I think, past a tipping point where the American public is so incensed about what is happening, and the opinion polls are falling so much for Trump that perhaps maybe this is the moment where we might see some policy change, or at least Congress stand up and do something about this.
So let me ask you this, and I know you're running in the state house, so you're not in Congress, and I think we can all agree we haven't had a real immigration bill in 30 years, which is absolutely crazy. So, and I was asking, I have an immigration attorney who comes on my show on Mondays. So what is the balance here? This is a big question, but I'm just curious because you're going to be in a border state. So how long can somebody come here, and should they be detained indefinitely? Do they come here and they just have a court date a few months later or 5 years later? The process is so broken, and I'm curious to know, how do we fix the process? Because, I don't have an issue with somebody coming here, but I do have some callers who call in, and, they could be falling for fear-mongering, but there is a question to be asked. What does this immigration process look like? Because it is broken, and it is messy, and it is complicated. So what is the fix here?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and it's really ultimately what all of us should be talking about, Republicans and Democrats. The fact that in this country, we don't even have to talk about we're a nation of immigrants or the humanitarian angle. Let's just talk about economics. Let's just talk about the fact that in every sector, we need immigrant labor, starting from, the obvious ones, hospitality and construction, but also in medicine, also in innovation, also in tech. Our baby boomers are aging. They need people to care for them. We need immigrant labor. Frankly, that's why people want to come here, because there are jobs for them. But we don't have a law that actually reflects the needs of the economy. So it actually invites people to come here without legal status. I mean, separating the question of, true asylum seekers who are fleeing something, that's that's actually just a sliver of immigration. Why don't we actually talk about, as a nation, we need immigrants. Immigration is a good word. So why don't we be honest about that and then decide we need this many laborers and this many work visas and temporary work visas? And why don't we go ahead and do something about the fact that we do have an undocumented population that's living in the shadows, which is not good for anyone. Let's offer them an opportunity to get legal status. They can pay a fine. They would gladly pay a fine. That would be income for the nation. Everyone would come out of the shadows. We could pass a structure that would invite workers to come here in a way that is supportive of the economy, keep our borders secure, have a small opportunity for people who are fleeing actual violence and are legitimate asylum seekers, and a humanitarian process for them. I mean, the truth is, this is not complicated, actually, but the reality is that the fear-mongering, to use your word, which I think is the right one, is such a powerful motivator for the Republican base, and it helps scapegoat the real reasons for their suffering, and Trump and all the Republican conservative politicians use it, people buy it, and now all of a sudden they're stuck. They can't pass a positive immigration bill because they've convinced everybody during their campaign season that all immigrants are rapists. So it's actually simple. What do we need? Pass a law, help legalize people who are living in the shadows, and let's move on and focus on, making all of our lives better, rather than this, rolling around in the mud fighting about immigration. It's stupid and it's racist. We have to always remember that. These anti-immigration people who are pushing these policies, not everybody who's anti-immigration are racist. Some people are ignorant. The ones at the top who are pushing these policies are racist.
Because they're cool with white immigrants being here. There is a huge undocumented population of Irish immigrants in New York City. I mean, it's huge, but no one talks about that. There's been articles on it, but nobody cares. They're cool if you're a white immigrant for the most part.
Oh, it's so obvious. They suspended refugee processing around the world, except for what? White Afrikaners. And you know why? Because they see themselves in those people. They see themselves in the people that pushed, that system in South Africa. And then they lost their land, because apartheid ended. And now they're victims. And who sees themselves in those people? Racist people in this country. That's why we see white South Africans are the only people coming in to be processed as refugees right now by the Trump administration.
Do you remember back in the day, I guess we were probably kids back then, a lot of younger listeners may not know this, that under the Reagan administration, because like you said, we need immigrant labor, this country has not figured out how to survive without immigrant labor or slave labor, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But remember back in the day, folks would come here and work for a day. You would easily cross the border in Mexico, the Mexican U.S. border, come work for a day, go back home. There wasn't this terror around border crossing. It's a very interesting time that you could go back the same day, and it was very common just to go work, or they would have seasonal work, go back. I'm not a big fan of Reagan. I don't know all the details how that happened, but this wasn't even a big talking point. Maybe even 20 years ago, but damn sure 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't all this madness.
Yeah, and that's actually part of the solution. I've worked with, thousands and thousands of immigrants. Most of them love their home. They love their family. They have people at home that they're supporting, and they would relish the opportunity to come here, work hard, support our economy, earn a bunch of money, go back home, come back and do it again. I mean, these sort of seasonal worker programs are actual win-win. Yeah. And what happened was that was sort of being done informally after Reagan, but then when 9/11 happened and the anti-immigrant sentiment really started building in this country, then we shut down the borders. And people kind of got trapped inside the United States. So people who were undocumented, who used to sort of come and go or have border crossing cards, they ended up just staying here. And I can't tell you how many heartbreaking stories I've heard from my clients over the years. People who have missed, their parents being in the hospital, their sister dying, weddings. They've now gone 2 decades. I mean, one of my friends hasn't seen her children in 2 decades, hasn't met her grandchildren because the border is completely shut off. And these are all people who no criminal history, work hard, would gladly come and go. And again, that's why if we had a common sense immigration plan that said we invite seasonal workers to come and go, please apply, pass a background check, tell us what industry you're going to work in, that would function so well for all of us. And it makes complete sense to do something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just sometimes you could just go back to our history and see the answers right there. All right. So let me ask you this. The area that you're campaigning for is the area that James Tallarico represents, but he's running for the Senate now. Mm-hmm. This area is 43% Hispanic, about 31% or so white. And, we often talk about black voters, but when I have folks on, I want to talk about white voters as well. For the life of me, I can't understand why the majority of white voters, at least in presidential elections, continue to vote for the Republican Party. And let me just say working class, middle class white voters. There has been a war on working class and poor white folks since I was a kid. The Nixon administration, the Reagan administration. And it appears no matter how much you talk about the kitchen table issues, mm-hmm. it doesn't seem to resonate. It's the Southern Strategy 2.0. Again, not all, but it is the majority, over 50%. No matter what they say, hey, we could help you with this. I mean, we could go back to, you have all these poor white folks during the Civil War fighting for the Confederacy for these rich white planters. What do they call the planter elite back then? I mean, this is an ongoing part of our politics. And what are your thoughts on that? What is the why that some of these poor white voters, working class voters, are aligning with the party that doesn't even want a minimum wage? I can go on and on.
Yeah, well, first I have to give a shout out to the voters in HD 50, which is the district where I live. We're an 80% Democratic district, very progressive district. So most of the white voters in my district are going the right way. But, nationwide and certainly along the South, it is not that way. And again, I'll connect this to history. In the late 1800s, it was the era of industrialization. The railroad companies brought over a bunch of Chinese laborers who completed the railroad, tied the West to the East, prosperous times. And then there was this slight economic downturn in the West Coast of the country. And all of the white laborers became convinced that they scapegoated the Chinese workers, and it drummed up this big anti-Chinese sentiment because they were stealing all the jobs. And if you look at the rhetoric of that era, it's really distressing. And they passed the act, I'm blanking on the name right now, that was in place for 80 years. That
was it the Chinese Exclusion Act?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
The Chinese Exclusion Act. So that's what happens with, like lower income white folks. Things get hard, which they are for many people right now. And some politician plants a seed that the reason for your problem is, immigrants. Hispanic people, all these people speaking Spanish in your mix, and it's like, oh, that feels good to them. I get to not be, responsible for this. I don't, it makes me feel better about myself. All of those things is just human nature for people who are grasping at straws for something in a life in which they themselves are suffering. And the Republicans know that. And so they feed them this stuff, and, these voters buy it hook, line, and sinker. That is my opinion, watching what happens and talking to people.
So you would be in the State House, mm-hmm. and I asked many people who are running for office this, and I think locally it's so important. But the Texas state legislature is blood red.
Yes.
To be frank, I mean, I'm loving this conversation with you. When you start talking history, that's my kind of conversation.
Awesome.
But if I'm wrong, correct me. There would be so little that you could do. It's so difficult. My goodness, like, you're already doing great things as an immigration attorney. You obviously know your history. You're not talking like a politician. We're just having a conversation here. I'm loving what you're saying, but why even be in that mess? Why not continue to do the great work it just seemed, to be frank, it sounds like a shit show what they did. You know, they were threatening to arrest some of the House Democrats. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Why even be in it?
It's a bloodbath for sure, and I think you're right. Regardless of the outcome of this election, I have work cut out for me, and that is good. I think, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for why. I was compelled to do it because I think I would do a good job at playing strong defense. I'm willing to stand up to these guys. I'm not afraid of them, and so that's why I decided to run. And honestly, any freshman Democratic legislator heading into the Texas House is not going to go in and pass a bunch of positive bills. I'll be honest about that. But what I can do is be a lawyer, be educated, bring the, resistance, information, and data to the floor debates in a way that resonates with people and the public, and maybe changes at least the conversation around the issues statewide. Because what I've seen happen, I've participated in some of these committee hearings. Like an example is SB 8 that requires all the sheriff's departments in Texas to essentially be immigration enforcers. And the sheriffs came before the committee and said, we don't want this. We don't have the resources for this. We're strapped as it is. We'd rather have a good relationship with the community. No thanks. But the committee doesn't care, because they've all been placed there. And then that information just gets lost on the floor debates. So part of what I want to do, if I get in there, is play really heavy, strong defense and bring some of this stuff to light in the floor debates. And whether that actually blocks negative legislation at the end of the day, I don't know. I can't make any promises on that front, but I'll fight like hell in or out of the Capitol,
Well, you know what? I think that's a great answer, because sometimes it is about having dissenters in there. Yeah. We can't just say because it's a majority Republican controlled in Mississippi or in Texas or in Louisiana that we just give up and say, okay, there's no reason to fight. You still have to have people in there for the fight, pushing back. So that's really, really, really important. Kate, how did you grow up? Like, what's your background? Are you born and raised in Texas? Like, what's your Texan background?
Yeah, I am born and raised in Texas, Austin. Born and raised in Austin.
Okay.
That's a very different thing than just any old part of Texas. My parents were hippies. They met in a commune in New Orleans, and I was born at home. And, raised with sort of progressive ideology, intellectuals. I frankly was very naive. Like the first time I went, I speak Spanish, and so I signed up for the immigration clinic in law school. And I thought, America's a land of immigrants and everything's great. And I went into this detention center and was confronted with my first clients. It was a family, a mom and a dad, a little baby, and they were wearing prison uniforms. Little prison onesie was on this baby. And her mom asked me if I'd take care of her, get her out of there, sneak her out and take care of her. And that moment just changed everything for me, because it really opened my eyes to the reality of immigration policy. And I had been searching for what I was going to do with my life, like we all do when we're sort of young or sometimes when we're old. But when I figured out what was going on, and I was like, this is it. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And, honestly, the fight's only gotten harder over the years. And so I'm looking forward to the days when we get to celebrate and have fun things like immigration reform. So I don't know, maybe I'm still optimistic. I haven't lost my optimism. I'm still going.
I've never been to Austin. The only thing I know about Austin is that that's where I think Janis Joplin went to college.
Oh,
and
yeah.
She dropped out because they voted her the ugliest man on campus. I never forgot that Janis Joplin story. Isn't that terrible? People are so mean. I love Janis Joplin. I went to Port Arthur. I went to her house when I was there. I love blues music, and that's my girl. So.
Oh, how cool. I'm a fan too. I didn't know that story about her. That's sad.
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, and then she hitchhiked to San Francisco and, left it all behind and all that good stuff. Well, listen, I really appreciate this conversation. I think local politics are really everything, and I'm super happy to have you on, and I appreciate the fight that you're doing, and I appreciate even if you don't win, even if you do, even if you're in there, you're still going to fight. Like, your vision is clear, and
Yeah.
I really do agree with you that sometimes it's important just to have the opposition, because you never know when things might break. You never know when something monumental could happen. And I know it sounds far-fetched that Republicans will never have control of the state legislature, but you just never know. So it's important to have people setting up an infrastructure, maybe 20, 30, 40 years from now. But if folks set the infrastructure up, you never know how folks are going to change. So that's really beautiful. I really appreciate that. How can folks follow you and support you?
Probably the easiest way is on Instagram. I'm at KLG for Texas .com. I mean, that also is my website, but yeah. That's how to find me.
Beautiful. Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, again, she is a state rep candidate for Texas House District 50, which is the seat that James Tallarico was in, but he's now running for senator. So if you're in Texas, if you're in this area, March 3rd, spread the word. These primaries are going to be so important, whether it is local, whether it is the House, whether it is the Senate. We got to make sure we're tapped in and engaged, because all politics local. Kate, good luck to you. Really appreciate you. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.